evening, everyone. Nice to see you. Thank you for coming. The talk tonight is entitled, I'm Only Human. I can't take any credit for it. I just took the ideas from these references. Heaven and Hell, chapter 7, and the Gospel According to Spiritism, chapter 25 and 27. And there's a slide at the end from a United States Spiritist Society, Federation Society, from their online gospel classes. So everything else, all of it is from them. I just have the good fortune of being able to present to you what I learned. How many of you have made that statement before? I'm only human. Both hands. Good job. Right? We all do to some degree, right? We blame our behavior. We blame our choices. We make excuses. It's, hey, I'm only human, right? And we'll talk more about this, and it takes a deeper role, right? Because it's true, we're human. And we definitely have some instinctual behavior as a part of the animal kingdom. But we also know we're eternal beings, right? We're spirits on this evolutionary path. So some of these things stem from that as well. And we'll dive into all of this. So Heaven and Hell, for those of you that haven't seen all of these books, was the fourth book in the codification of Spiritism that was penned by Allan Kardec with a whole lot of help from mediums and evolved spirits sending us these wonderful messages. Heaven and Hell is probably, I would say, one of the least, I shouldn't say this, it's my opinion, but for what I can tell from my friends and from study groups, it seems like the least studied book if you go through some of the study classes. And again, I could be wrong, but I think it's one of the best. Heaven and Hell, half of that book, probably a little bit more, is wonderful, true stories from spirits that have passed, right? Telling their experience, how they lived, how they spent their time in lower zones or in that errant state, life between life, centuries, some of these spirits accounting for their past transgressions, right? So it's a wonderful learning tool to enlighten us and help us try to avoid some of the mistakes that they talk about. So as we all know, right, the whole idea, right, the whole process is the spirit, not the human, right? This is one life of many along this eternal pathway. The closer you are to the bottom left, right, the more you're tied to ego, to pride, to matter, and the less you're tied to that pure love, like the example of Christ that he showed us, right? That pure love. We are somewhere in between the both ends, but if you're here on earth, most likely you're in the bottom third, right? We're what's considered imperfect spirits. We're here for trials and atonement, right, and missions to improve. And that's really what the talk is about tonight. It's about understanding that we start this life with no memory of the past, right? Fortunately, by the grace of God, we're eternal, but also by the grace of God, we have no memory of our wrongs in the past. Could you imagine if you were born into this life knowing all the mistakes you made in all the previous lives? I'm 56 years old. I know, I don't look it. Thank you. Appreciate that, yes. But could you imagine, I mean, just in my 56 years, there's things I've done or thought that I would never tell any of you, right? Because I'm ashamed of them, right? Nothing recent, but you know what I mean, right? Imagine if you take 100 lives and you have all of that information, right? The point is, some of our tendencies as men, as humans, as women, right? They're inherent to the soul. They belong to our moral side. And our morality, our moral qualities, our character didn't start at birth, right? They came with us from all the previous lives. So some of these tendencies, when we say we're only human, right, it's because I'm human, we really can't attribute them to the animal instinct. We have to attribute them to their cause, which is that moral side that developed over time. In this chapter in Heaven and Hell, they do explain how it's definitely related to human organization, though. As humans, we definitely have a predisposition to anger. How many of you have to count to 10 sometimes so you don't blow up? I have 3 teenage daughters, so I count to 20 sometimes, right? How many of you fight with laziness or procrastination sometimes? Yeah, awesome. As humans, we definitely have vice and issues with sensuality, all these things that we can use that excuse as I'm only human, all right? All of these things are related to the organization of the human, and we're told, right, that we tend to regard these as things that we're not responsible for. Yeah, my dad was like that, right? Oh, that's what I learned in the neighborhood. All the guys do it, right? We tend to say we're not responsible. We were. It's our environment. It's what we were taught. It's what we learned. And what heaven and hell, right, is teaching us, right, is that's just not the case, right? The fact is that our organs, our body, our physical nature, our mental aptitudes as humans are all the consequence of our development of the activity of the soul in this life and previous lives. The development of these behaviors is actually the effect, not the cause, right? Our soul's activities, our soul's behavior, our spirit's previous existences, all weigh and impact the development of what we sometimes call I'm only human. Does that make sense? All right, good. For example, right, we're told in this chapter that they point out, look, a man's not a musician because he has the beat of music in him. A person is a musician because his spirit is already musical. So the point is, this body, right, it's kind of like a prison, right? We're trapped in this body. The spirit's trapped for whatever length this life is, right? And it's fashioned by us prior to coming here, right? Based on our tendencies, our moral development, our intellect, all these different things that we're bringing with us. And the body's simply a vessel, a tool, a vehicle to interact with the world, to interact with each other, to put ourselves to these tests and these atonements so that we can improve. So we show up here as humans very much the way we left the previous life. Not physically necessarily, right? We could be a different sex, we could be a different color, we could have handicaps, all different types of things. But the things that count, our morality, our character, our intellect, those don't just suddenly change when we die. Okay? All right. If I'm getting too deep, tell me. They go on to say that the spirit is the artisan, right, of the physical body that it fashions for itself. For what purpose? The manifestation of its tendency. So in previous lives, there's a great story in a book we've read before about a spirit who's gone through many lives. In this particular life, he's a surgeon, right? His hand saves lives, right? The life before that, he was a thief, and he'd rob people with a knife. The life before that, he was a soldier and a sword. He killed people with a sword. So through many existences, this guy was good with a blade, right? Good with a knife, was good with a sword. But over the development of his spirit, life after life, the use of those skills, the use of that moral development changed his course or his actions, little by little, life after life, progressing and evolving. Clear? Makes sense? All right. Now, it might not have been 1, 2, 3 lives. It might have been 100 lives and then another 100 lives. I'm not suggesting we make these huge leaps in one life, but it definitely happens over times. And essentially, what we're told here, right, these manifestations of these tendencies, the way we sculpt our body and our attributes as we come, the way we put ourselves in these situations, our body's improved into more advanced beings. And it's not necessarily the product of a distinct creation, but rather, right, what we're told here on the next slide, it's the result of more enlightened actions of the spirit. As I make better choices, as you make better choices, as we amend or atone for the mistakes of the past, our moral character, our ability to climb that scale that I showed you, right? We rise, right? We eventually rise at our own pace. And as a result, as we become more enlightened or more evolved, what happens? We make better choices, right? Which perpetuates and keeps improving. I love how they say it improves our tools, it improves our methods of working in proportion to the development of their moral and intellectual faculties. Because if I drop dead tonight, right, God forbid, right, if I drop dead tonight, it's not like I die and my spirit evolves and all of a sudden I'm a pure spirit, right? When I come back the next life, all of my moral qualities that are positive and my negatives, they don't just elevate, right? They stay the same until I work through them. But with each passing life, we increase a little bit to where we are more morally and intellectually evolved. So they stress that the moral qualities of the incarnated spirit, right? That's you, that's me, right? Incarnated spirit in a body are the natural consequences of previous actions, right? Death doesn't change our character, doesn't change our intellect. Our vice doesn't change. Our morality doesn't change, right? Over time it changes, but from life to life, death does not eradicate and elevate us. And this is what the third slide on this, because this is the third time in that chapter they talk about it. It's very important. They stress it several times that death is not a past to all of a sudden be better. It's part of the journey. And we call this, right, cause and effect, right? My thoughts lead to the words that come out of my mouth, which lead to the actions of my body. If I think about it, I usually talk about it, and then I usually do it. And the more I expose myself to negativity, when I was younger, I spent a lot of time with a crowd that I probably wouldn't hang out with today, right? I was a smoker, right? I drank a little too much. I like to drive fast. I still like to drive fast, but don't tell my wife, all right? I told her I slow down. No. What's that?
I think she's not here.
Oh, she's here. Hi, honey. I don't hang out with that crowd anymore, and I still don't drive as fast as I used to fast. But those actions that I took, right, those causes, those things led to impacts on my life. And I won't bore you with my life story, but we all have that story, right? We've all made choices in this life that probably led to some consequences that helped us change. And when you multiply that lifetime over lifetime, we get to the point where little by little we're making progress. I've been fortunate enough to be studying Spiritism now for 18 years, maybe 19 years, give or take. And this is not me pounding my chest, right? This is just me being humble and honest. I'm a different person today because of the fact that I come here on Thursday nights and I read a little bit of a book every day. I pray a little bit more than I used to. And I think all of you are on that journey to improve. I don't think you'd be here on a Thursday night if you weren't trying to improve and change your direction or change your situation. There's a lot of other things we could be doing on a Thursday night, right? We don't have to be here. And that's going to lead to these changes in the way we live. They go on to tell us that the weak and the indolent spirit leaves his incarnated body or her incarnated body in a state corresponding to its character. Again, that same topic, right? It leaves it in the state that it was in. Whatever your state is when this life passes, right, and when you return, right? If you were energetic and active, you're going to have that when you come back. If you were more of a procrastinator and perhaps lazy, not motivated to do as much, you're going to still have those tendencies when you come back. So however you leave this body, right, those qualities atone or are aligned with how you start your next life. But we have the ability, obviously, to change little by little in each life. Our individual temperament, then, they tell us, is determined at least in part by the nature of the spirit. No doubt about that. And it's viewed then as the cause, not the effect. The nature of our spirit, right, whatever it is at this point in time, is the cause of where we wind up, not the effect. Then they talk about this, I'm only human, right? Because we all raised our hand almost, right? We've all said this or thought this, I'm only human. And they remind us that the weakness of the flesh, when it's used to blame our faults, our wrongs, our misdeeds on anything other than us making the choice, is simply an invasive attempt to run away from the responsibility. I'm only human. I'm my daughters, right? I told you I have 3 teenage daughters. There's always an excuse, right? why something isn't done, right? Little by little, they're doing it less, but we do the same thing, right? We all have different responsibilities at home, at work, among our friends. And over the years, like we raised our hand, we made that excuse. But remember, whenever we do that, who made the decision? Right? If we didn't get something done, if we did something that we shouldn't have done, and we blame whatever we blame, at the end of the day, who made that decision? I made that decision. You made that decision. So we are solely responsible for the actions they take. And they say here, right, the flesh is only weak because the spirit is weak. And in this next slide, they talk a little bit more about that, right? The spirit is responsible for all its deeds during its earthly lifetime. The flesh has neither thought nor will or mastery over the spirit. In other words, the spirit, right, does the thinking, right, and wills action. So if I make a unilateral decision, you remember those cartoons? When I was a kid, they had a devil on one shoulder and a little angel on the other, right? And there's always a joke, right? The devil would say, do it, do it, do it. The angel was, don't do it, don't do it, right? We're born with a conscience, right? Those laws, those natural laws of God, of the universe are written, right? Most of us know, I think, when we're making a decision that's not the best. Agreed? Right? Yet we still choose at times to listen to the devil on our shoulder, right? What they're telling us here is ultimately, if I make a unilateral decision to do something that violates those universal laws, that puts my ego and my pride above someone else, that is farther away from, more attached to material than it is to love, that's my choice. And it's going to impact my spirit because ultimately I'm making the decision. It's nobody else's fault but my own. I feel like I'm beating a dead horse. But again, this is the 5th time we talked about it. They go on to tell us that the spirit gives to flesh the various qualities corresponding to its own instinctive tendencies. So, I shared some of my tendencies earlier in life, right, with you. You have your own stories. In that interim, right, you pass away. You're born again at some point. Then there's that period of time, like in the book Heaven and Hell. There's some spirits that talk about centuries, right, between lives, where they're healing and getting stronger so they can come back, right? We decide, along with our mentors, right, some key things about our next life. Socioeconomic status, geographical location, major health conditions, right? Some people that did terrible things with their hands might come back with deformities of the hand, right? Some people that maybe did terrible things, hurt people in certain parts of their body with a weapon, they might have organs that are damaged or diseases that are damaged, right? All these things to push us to evolve and to grow. We decide those things, right? And that's what they're talking about here. The spirit gives to flesh the various qualities corresponding to its own instinctive tendencies, so that in this life we are forced to challenge ourselves. We're forced to deal with some of those consequences and overcome them. Easy enough? No, it's not. It's very hard, yeah? It's very hard. Very, very hard. But simple enough to talk about, okay? All right. They go on to tell us that the spirit who has freed himself from the instincts of the material life, what does that mean? Less tied to matter, less tied to ego, less tied to pride, right? More attracted to that pure love, that kindness, that compassion, just like Christ taught us, right? The freed himself from the instincts of material life, fashions for himself a human body lacking obstacles to the aspirations of his spiritual nature. I promise you, and we read about this and we talk about it, but I think we forget it sometimes. We were born with a mission. We were born with a spiritual mission. Each one of us. We don't remember it. Right? It's not written any place we can read about it until we really quiet ourselves, calm ourselves, meditate, and really focus. And that message will be interpreted differently throughout your life, right? The same mission evolves and changes. And you've given yourself right? God has given us, our guardian angel is there to inspire us and guide us. We have all the tools at our disposal that we need to accomplish our mission. The biggest obstacle is ego, pride, right? Those things that tie us to vice, that tie us to everything opposite of love and compassion. We're reminded, right, that each human being, right, is fully responsible for its actions. There's no, I'm only human, right? There's no excuses. Our accountability, however, is proportionate to the intellectual development of the spirit. You know what that means? Coming here makes you more responsible, right? The more you study, the more you learn, the more responsible you are. Because we know better. We read, we listen, we study these things. 30 years ago, 40, oh man, what am I saying? 40 years ago when I was a kid, right? Man, I'm getting old, right? 40 years ago when I was a kid, I didn't know. I wasn't exposed to it. Now, that doesn't make the mistakes any less of a mistake, but the accountability for the actions I make today, I'm much more accountable than I was 40 years ago because I know so much more. I'm more educated on this. I'm more enlightened, if you will. Therefore, the less excusable the action. So now when I drive fast and cut people off, or they cut me off, I don't shoot them anything with my hands. I just wave and say a prayer for them, okay? I don't yell or scream or blow my horn anymore. All right. So a reminder, right? The more developed the spirit's intellect, the more evolved the character, their moral sense, their ability to identify good and evil, knowing right from wrong, then the better their choices they're going to make, right? The more we educate, the more we elevate, the consequence of that, right? The effect is technically we're going to be making better choices, right? So how do we progress? This is where we get into the gospel. There's 2 chapters from the gospel that I put on that first slide. How do we progress? Well, one of those is the law of labor. What does that mean? Got to work, right? Right? How many of you have been depressed at times in your life and you just didn't want to get out of bed? Happens sometimes, right? That's counterintuitive. It's counterproductive, right? Don't get me wrong. There's legitimate cases, and I'm not saying that's wrong, but it perpetuates, right? What we learn is the law of labor, the work. You kind of get out of bed as best you can. You got to put one foot in front of the other. You've got to try to solve your problems, and the way you do that is through work. That could be something as simple as getting up, opening a book, and reading, right? Trying to learn something new. That's a labor. It could be just going and doing something for your neighbor, right? Pulling their weeds, putting out their trash, bringing in their trash can. Get up and work in some way. Progression also requires the law of progress. What does that mean? That means from life to life, right? By your own design, by your own pace, by your own choices. You cannot hold back progress in the sense of eternity. You are going to evolve and become a pure spirit. That can take a lot longer and be more painful, or it can be shorter and less painful based on the choices you make, right? The more we aspire and try to live like Christ, the shorter that's going to be and the less painful it's going to be. The next one says what? You will seek and you shall find. Don't wait for the moral fairy to drop evolvement on you, right? Doesn't just get dropped on you, right? Don't expect to be surprised by you overcoming your vice overnight, right? You got to look for help. You got to look for solutions. You've got to work towards the goal. And this is, I have to remind myself of this all the time. You have to look at things differently, right? How many of you, like for me, right? One of my vices that I still have left, you will never guess this, but I like food, yeah? Right? 3 years ago, I was probably 40 pounds lighter, right? Now I'm back on the way down, right? I'll go on this cycle over decades of my life, right? And I remind myself as I go through this cycle, again, are you going to do the same thing again? right? Well, it's the same thing with our spiritual involvement or with the way we live, right? Our moral development, right? If you keep doing the same things over and over, how can you expect a different result? So don't be afraid to find new ways to look at things differently from different perspectives. Ultimately, all these different things lead to us becoming the children of our deeds, right? We are the consequences of our thoughts, our words, and our actions. Anything that happens while I'm in the body, right? My choices, my thoughts, my words, my actions are imprinted on my perispirit, right? The body is gone at some point, right? It becomes food for the worms, right? The perispirit attached to my spirit, all these actions, all these choices I'm making or not making are imprinted on my spirit via this connection. And throughout millennia, right, throughout lifetimes, I will be working to correct choices that I make in this life, and I'm working on those from previous lives. There's no escaping accountability. We're always creators, the gospel reminds us, of our own fate. We can shorten our punishment. How can we shorten our punishment? Make less mistakes, right? If you feel victimized, or if you feel as though you victimized someone, or you have guilt or pain from an event, one event, right? Don't tell me, don't say it out loud, but think about one thing maybe you regret. One thing. How many times did it happen? One time. Every time you have guilt about it, every time you have regret, every time you play it back in your head, it's happening again. Imagine a little cut with a razor. I did it one time. I got a little nick. I bled a little bit. Every time I go back and I think about how stupid that was and how, man, I can't believe that happened. I can't believe they did that to me. I can't believe this happened. My brain doesn't know the difference. Your brain doesn't know the difference between the physical cut and the emotional impact, right? It's like it's happening over and over again. And that's not my science. That's MRI studies of the brain. This is real stuff. So the point is, we can shorten our punishment or prolong it based on not only our choices from one day to the next, but how much we let those choices of what other people did to us or what we did to others linger with us and eat us up with guilt or remorse. Does that make sense? Is it easy? No, but we have to try to remember that, because I'm definitely guilty of that. I want to shorten my punishment, right? The guilty and unhappy spirit can always save itself. There's a wonderful quote from Chico Xavier, right? He says, you can't go back and change your beginning, but everybody can change their ending, right? We have the ability right now to change the course of our lives. Each second, we have the ability to create a new ending for ourselves by the choice that we make. So I ask you, do you feel guilty? I do sometimes. Are you unhappy? I am sometimes. Is there a better life that I'd like to be living? Is there a better life that you could be living? For me, the answer is yes. I could be living better. So how am I going to do that? How can we do that? Right? This is not my advice. This is from the gospel, right? How do we achieve this? Place a limit on your material ambition, right? The things I've done for money in the past, right? Terrible, some of them. I didn't kill anybody, right? But I definitely worked to the advantage, took advantage of certain situations to better the profitability of my business. Didn't break any laws, didn't treat people badly, but definitely had material ambition. This is going to sound crazy, right? I would rather be poor, right, and have to start all over than ever be in a situation where I have great wealth again. Because I think for me, it's much easier in that way. But that's me. I'm not saying that's right for everybody. So I have to control my material ambition. I'm very goal-oriented, and that will get me in trouble. It has gotten me in trouble. Not so much now, but in the past it has. So that's one thing I have to do, and they recommend we all do it. The other thing they recommend, the next thing they recommend is reach for spiritual growth. What does that mean, spiritual growth? We're all wherever we are right now in our spiritual development. I'm where I am, you're where you are. Is it fair to say that we could all improve a little bit? Absolutely, right? So reach for spiritual growth. What does that mean? There's a library over here, right, of great books. You don't even have to buy them, right? We have a bookstore if you want to buy them, but there's a library. Borrow a book. Read a few pages every day. Pray a little bit more, right? Try to calm yourself. Listen to your guardian angel for advice, right? They tell us to be humble and reduce the impact of hurt pride, right? Easier said than done, right? For sure. Practice the law of charity. That does not mean you have to write a check for lots of money. That can be something as simple as bringing in that lady next door her trash can, right? Who has a walker and she can't walk real well, right? Helping her with her trash, pulling her weeds, opening the door for somebody, slowing down on the turnpike and letting that semi get in front of you, even though you know it's going to slow you down another 3 minutes and you're already late for work. Simple things, right? Finding a way to help. We have friends in the center that are part of the Caravan of Love. They go to nursing homes on Sunday. They feed the homeless a couple times a month, right? We have all kinds of opportunity here to do charity. Then finally they say reduce slander. How many of you like to gossip at the water tower, at the water take at work? How many of you listen to that stuff, right? It's always something going on, right? I can't believe Johnny did this. Can you believe Susan did that? Do you know what's going on in accounting, right? Reduce slander, reduce gossip, envy. How many of you want what your neighbors have, right? Hopefully, that's okay to want things, but don't envy to the point where you wish them to lose it and you to get it, right? Jealousy, try to reduce that. How many of us have senseless quarrels on Facebook or Twitter? You ever get caught up in that kind of stuff? I think we'd all be better if we just got rid of that stuff on our phone. So try not to quarrel anymore. And then avoid dissension at all costs, right? Turn the other cheek, things like that. All of these things are easy to read, but they're all challenging at times in their own right. But this is the advice. All right? Become a follower of the way, the gospel tells us. Followers of the way were what early Christians were called. So Christ had been crucified. The apostles traveled the world at the time, that area, right? And they lived by his example. They preached his gospel, his good news, and they were called followers of the way, right? And we're given the same advice today. Imagine Christ just being a man, right? No, there isn't this church that followed him for 2,000 years. There isn't Spiritism. We don't know all the things we knew. All we know is there's this guy named Jesus that walked the earth. He helped the poor. He fed the hungry. He healed the sick, right? He turned the other cheek, right? If all we knew were his actions, and all we did, if everybody in the world just tried to live like him, am I wrong in thinking that the world would be a better place? Be a much better place, right? So we're taught, right? Try to live like Christ, right? And Spiritism teaches us the way that Christ lived is the best example to live. And I'm convinced that's the truth. Do I do it every day? Heck no. Do I do it all day, at least one day a week? Heck no. Do I have moments of absolute brightness on a Sunday sometimes or on a Tuesday? Absolutely. Because every day I can honestly tell you I don't get up with a desire to do bad. I make mistakes. I falter. I make the same mistake twice sometimes, 3 times. But every day in my heart, what I know I'm doing today that I didn't do 30 years ago, right? Maybe even 20 years ago. I wake up with a sincere desire to help people. And I guarantee you most of you in this room wake up with the same desire. To not hurt anybody, to live your best possible life, right? To improve, right? Yet life gets in the way. So when in doubt, just think of that example of Christ. And I love this slide. This is the last slide, and I will leave it up here so you can read it at your leisure. But just remember the acronym KNOCK, right? I'm just going to read the first piece. Keep your faith, right? That sounds easy, but we lose faith a lot, right? It's easy to get down and out. The N, never give in to doubt and fear. O, out of the ordinary. That ties into find a different way, right? If a door opens this way, but you can't get it open, maybe there's another hinge. Maybe it opens a different way, right? Don't always assume that it's one way. And then the C stands for choose, right? We have the ability to choose, right? thoughts, words, actions. Feed yourself with good stuff, right? Read good books, listen to good movies and things like that. And I'm guilty of that. I'll be on the couch sometimes on Netflix watching stupid stuff. What happens when I'm feeding myself with that stuff? It doesn't help, right? So I'm trying to read more good stuff, right? And then finally, the second K, keep your heart and mind guarded. Protect yourself. How many of you think about the last couple of things you were doing on the way to the center? Where you stopped, what you thought, right? Anything negative, what did that do? Typically, it attracts negative energy. We all dragged a whole bunch of negativity from our week, right? That's why I love Thursday so much. We come here dragging in negativity. We walk into this wonderful energy, and if you're like me, you can feel it as soon as you walk in the door. And when we leave, right, we finish the talk, we do the vibrations, we get a pass. I don't know about you guys, but I feel 20 pounds lighter emotionally, right? And I leave here kind of cleansed, right? And then I got all week, I'm building up negativity a little bit. So what I try to do each week is be guarded, right? Little by little, listen to better stuff, read better stuff, and try to avoid the negativity. But I'm going to leave this slide up for a bit so you can read all the details. I'm going to stop talking so that you guys can go home tonight. You want me to go another hour? Yep. No, stop. But thank you for your time and your attention. I really appreciate it.